Where we at? There we go. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Starlight Beacon. We're back. I'm back, ready to talk about KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic. Got some exciting news for the Old Republic fans. Aspyr Studios is currently developing a remake of the KOTOR franchise, starting with KOTOR 1, and hopefully we can get KOTOR 2, maybe a KOTOR 3. Who knows? Let's talk about it. We're going to speculate about it just a little bit. There's an article by Screen Rant that I'm going to go over, kind of sort of covering this news. And then I'm going to give a rundown of my top 5 wish list items for this remake. And so, yeah, let's talk about it, man. I'm ready to get into it. How y'all doing? How's my audio, by the way? Let me know if I'm coming in too loud or what have you, if I need to make any adjustments to anything. Make sure we're queued up here, and I think we are. Yes, we are. Here we go. So, let's get into it. All right. From Screen Rant, Star Wars KOTOR remake may be more action and less RPG, rumors claim. Aspyr Studios might be developing the remake for more to be more action oriented in a new rumor. Aspyr is the confirmed developer of KOTOR, but some may not be thrilled about the direction the development team is supposedly looking to take the series. While the original 2 titles were more traditional RPG experiences, boasting in-depth stories and an emphasis on player choice, the latest remake rumors point towards something more like Mass Effect 2 and 3. Now, that being said, let me get back here to me, focus on me. I don't have a problem with this. I'm being honest, and here's why. My top 5 list of things. Number 1 for KOTOR is an updated combat system. I know that KOTOR is one of the best Star Wars video games. Some argue that it is the greatest Star Wars video game of all time. I am one of those people. Jedi Fallen Order being a really close second, if not tied for first, in my personal opinion. I think there were some people who had some problems with some of the fight mechanics, it being a platformer or whatnot, but the story is on par with KOTOR for me. The magical thing about KOTOR was like, this is a game where it dove into like a completely new era, the Old Republic. It's an era that we don't really explore too much in Star Wars and hadn't explored that much in any mainstream medium like video games. And so like for many, it not having any legacy characters, so there are no Skywalkers, no one related to Han Solo, no one related to anybody that we knew, no characters in it that we knew. These are all brand new characters created for the game. It was a brand new Star Wars experience on that came out on Xbox and PC, I believe. I think PC and Xbox had it initially, and then it relaunched elsewhere years later. But the story was one of the greatest stories of all time. from a Star Wars perspective, and this is like 2003, so this is like the height of the prequels. Um, the Old Republic is an era that for me is like one of the best eras of Star Wars. It is my favorite time period, and it's because of games like this and stories like what this game depict, that showcase a different side of the Star Wars galaxy, one that's way more expansive and way or a lot vaster than what we experience on screen, and in many of the others, because you've gotten like these grand battles between the Sith Empire and the Republic, the Jedi Order in its prime, the Sith Empire in its prime, and all of these legendary battles that are rumored or that we've heard about via legend or story being passed down through, um, the films and then some other books and things that were coming out at the time. We actually got a chance to live and experience some of these stories, which was amazing. So for me, top 5 things that need to be updated. Number 1 being the combat system. Turn-based combat systems, they're not a modern form of combat mechanics for many people. A lot of people don't like turn-based combat. It's just not a popular combat system in 2021. Hasn't been for some time. I'd say for at least 10 years now. So, for me, Jedi Fallen Order, I like the combat system. It didn't take me long to get used to it, to get adjusted to it, and I wouldn't mind seeing something like that implemented into this game, into KOTOR. I think it would greatly enhance the playability of this game for a lot of people, for a lot of gamers out there, especially in current times, because back in 2002, 2003, whenever this game came out originally, it was commonplace for RPG games to be turn-based. That was kind of sort of the norm, because everything is like, the combat is based on it's a roll mechanic, so it's chance algorithm basically. The more you upgrade your character, the higher percentage chance you get to roll for a higher hit. So essentially, by upgrading your character over time, it just increases the power level of that character and increases the chance of you hitting higher level, dealing more damage on the enemy combatant. And at the time, that turn-based system worked, but it is very slow. If you have played, if you've played it recently, you'll. It's so slow and it lags so much as far as intensity, that it's just not a suitable game mechanic for today's age, and especially with like, it's going to have to compete with games like Call of Duty and Fortnite, where I'd imagine that they're trying to get a younger audience to come in and play this game and experience this game for the first time, and I just can't see them lashing on to it with the current gameplay mechanic, that turn-based system. It's just not going to work for it. Another thing about the combat system too is, if they don't update the combat system and just change it entirely to more of an action oriented, where I'm more immersed into the combat, like I'm pressing an actual button and it affects the, you got a basic swing, and then you got more of a power swing that's a different button, things of that nature, and you can do combination of buttons to get different abilities to activate. If they're not going to do something like that, which is more of a modern system, then they really need to update the speed and revamp all of the animations in the turn-based combat system and make it a lot faster, a lot more intense, or at least scale it in a way so as your character levels up and you get more upgrades to certain abilities and certain skills, that the animations become more and more complex and it's way more interesting and engaging to watch. Because as it plays now, you kind of sort of, all you do is pick certain abilities in a string that you want to your player to use during this combat. So like, let's say your ability bar has 5 slots and you've got 5 different attacks. You pause the game, you queue up those 5 attacks that you want to in the sequence that you want to, you hit play, and then it animates out, and then the game from there lets chance take over, and then it allows for based on your abilities and your skill set and the abilities of your opponent and their skill set, all of that affects the probability and chance of you landing an actual hit and how much damage it's going to deal. A lot of people don't like to play like that. A lot of people want to be more in control of the combat system. Take, for example, Elder Scrolls Online versus Skyrim. A lot of players who were fans of Skyrim were not fans of Elder Scrolls Online because of the combat system changes. Elder Scrolls Online went back to a more traditional RPG combat system that was that chance system where you queue up those attacks and then chance and probability take over from there. Whereas Skyrim, like, you're in complete control of your combat, so you're swinging in the direction of the swing, and when you shoot an arrow, all of that is player controlled. So it's your own personal skill as a player dictating how effective you are as a fighter. Two completely different styles, and I think most modern gamers would much prefer to play a game where you're in complete control of the combat and the combat system and the mechanics. That being said, that's my number one thing, because the story really is a strong story and you don't have to change much about the story. There are some elements of the story that will probably have to change if they want to make this a canonical aspect of the Star Wars universe in the Disney canon timeline, and we'll get into that later in the episode, but I want to get through my top 5 first before I go back into like the possible ways they may change the story, which has been rumored. But number 2 on my list after the combat system upgrade would be fully voiced dialogue. In KOTOR 1 and in KOTOR 2, both of those games are not fully voiced. Only the NPCs and the characters that you interact with have actual voiced dialogue. You, as the player, your character does not actually have a voice. You just select, the dialogue options that you want to, and whoever you're speaking to reacts to whatever you've selected. SWTOR, or Star Wars The Old Republic, completely changed that. Like, that was the first time we got an Old Republic game where the character voice, you as the player had a voice. Like, your character was fully voiced. So when you selected the dialogue option, you actually heard the player say that, and then your character, and then the NPC that you were talking to would respond accordingly. That's something that they have to implement into this game. I think it's easy change, and there's a couple ways that they could do it. Like, one, of course, the easiest way is to hire a voice actor. Now, if they want to make this a canon thing, if Disney and Lucasfilm want to make this game canon and part of the canonical timeline, then they're going to have to change certain elements of the story to fit within this. That also is going to limit the player customization to probably just cosmetic things like maybe hairstyles, and clothing in your lightsaber, and probably the ship, the Ebon Hawk. And then beyond that, you wouldn't be able to change much, especially if it's going to be canonical, because I'm pretty sure Disney and Lucasfilm would have, a set gender for Revan. Like, they would already have his or her look solidified, just like they did with Cal Kestis. Like, you can't customize Cal Kestis physically. You can't change any of his physical attributes or his gender. They'll probably do the same thing with this character if they choose to make this a canonical story. but every other aspect of it aesthetically you would be able to change. If they do it that way, then of course there'll be the male or the female voice that of preference that they want to have, and then of course they may model it after the voice actor, similar to what they did with Cal Callahan, I believe that's his name, who's the actor for Cal Kestis. Um, but if it's not going to be canon, it's going to be similar to what it was in the original game, then I would like it if you had multiple voices to choose from. So let's say they hire at least three male voice actors, and then at least three female voice actors, and then you'd be able to choose which of those three for either gender that you would rather prefer. And then of course, if they want to do like, you know, have trans characters and you can mix and match voices, it doesn't matter. That's whatever for me. But if they want to have a fully customizable experience for the players, then I think having multiple voice options is definite, and I think there should be at least three for each gender. And if not, if it's going to be set, then of course it's set, but it needs to be voiced. We can't have a remake of this game and the main character who you are playing not be voiced, because it just doesn't fit in 2021. Like, we're accustomed to RPG games and MMO games where your character is fully voiced. I think the only exception that I can think of late is what the Division in Destiny, and even Destiny in the sequel changed to your character now has a voice. So, times are changing, and I think that would be a welcome aspect of an update for Aspyr Studios to do, and I think a lot of people would enjoy that aspect if the character is actually voiced, because it makes it more immersive, it makes it more enjoyable for the players, because you're in this world, the single player world, and everything about the environment is going to enhance your experience and your gameplay experience. So from the sounds and the map and the visual and the story, the dialogue, everything has to be immersive. It has to get to the next level, and it has to get you sucked into it. And so in my opinion, I think for most modern gamers, when you're playing an RPG game, you're kind of expecting everything to be fully voiced. So that's my number two. So to reiterate, number one being the updated combat system, number two being fully voiced dialogue, number three being planetary and auxiliary quest lines. This is number three because I think this is a large ask, and it's probably not likely. I don't have any inside information about in terms of what they're actually going to upgrade and what all this reboot entails. I don't know any of that information. I'm just a regular dude. I don't know anything. But on my wish list, planetary and auxiliary quest lines is a must. That would so much more enhance this story. And what I mean by that is you've got your main character quest line, which is the story of basically Revan, and however they choose to tell that story. That has to be played chronologically, meaning that you can't go out of order. You have to complete a mission in sequential order in order to unlock the next part of the mission, whether it be on that planet or on the next planet. That sequential order is important, but they need to add planetary quests, I think at least at the minimum, where there is a set number of quests that are localized to that planet, whatever planet that you're on, that kind of sort of build your rep and notoriety around the galaxy. That's a fun aspect of modern RPG games, and most RPG games in at least the past 15-20 years almost. Again, going back to that immersive experience, you got to have enough content in there for the players, especially with a single player game, because you want them to put in as many hours as possible. So the more quests you put in, the more hours the players are going to put in, but there also has to be a reward. So of course you've got your bonus XP, certain upgrades. There are certain things that you can do as far as unlocks. Maybe certain planetary quests give you, you know, specialized gear that you can only get on that planet. All types of cool stuff like that. That all that kind of sort of enhances the gameplay experience for the player, and keeps you, you know, in it. I don't want to see a multiplayer aspect personally. I don't see, I just can't see how that works. Um, I'm 100% on board for a remake, but they need to revamp the experience as a whole. Um, so yeah, and then the auxiliary quests would be stuff like side missions where like you're exploring the world and you come across an NPC who has a quest, and it's like a dark side light side, you know, mission where you got the option at the end of it to pick one way or the other. That's something that I would like to see implemented into the game, just to make it more immersive for the players. Hey Ma, what's going on? Thank you for joining. All right, so next on my hit list, number 4, I've got exploration reward system. So one thing that the current game lacks is a reward system for players who like to go around and explore. Like, there's more to a game than just playing the missions. Like, if you want to, you know, keep players invested in the game, to keep them coming back, have things for them to find on the planet, and, you know, have a reward system for that. Fallen Order does this very well. Like, there are these logs that you can find, that kind of sort of, well, diaries, journals that you can find, and things that you can find in the world that Cal can interact with, and he will experience or learn more about the world or an event that took place. That is definitely something they need in this game, being that this comes at the end of the Mandalorian Wars. You know, on the planets where the war actually took place, it would be cool to, you know, as you're exploring, find certain data logs and hollow diaries and journals from combatants from both sides of the conflict that kind of sort of, you know, give a recount or retelling of the battles that transpired on that planet from their perspective. You know, what was going on in the life of a Republic soldier who was fighting on the front. Like, how did they feel about Revan and his leadership during that battle? How did the Mandalorians, like, how did the Mandalorians feel about the Mandalore the Ultimate and his prowess as a fighter, and his military experiences, and his ability to lead troops in the battle? Like, things of that just make it a little more immersive. It makes it feel lived in. It makes it feel like I'm a part of something, you know, part of an actual living world with history. All of that stuff kind of makes it really fun for players who are playing single player games. Like, we want a lot more content. We want to be immersed completely into these worlds and into these experiences. So all of that adds to it. Coop Daddy Yoda, what's going on? That is number 4. So far on my list, for those of you who are just now joining, welcome, of course. Number 1, I have an updated combat system. Number 2, fully voiced dialogue. Number 3, planetary and auxiliary quest lines for each planet, of course. And number 4 was an exploration award system. And as I forgot to mention, the reward system being, you unlock certain cosmetic things. Like, maybe if you find, you know, all of the hollow journals on a certain planet, you get a new outfit or a new paint job for the Ebon Hawk or something cool. Do exactly what they did in Jedi Fallen Order. Basically, that all helps with the experience and in the replay value of the game. Replay value is also a key thing, which I'll get into. And then last on my list, which I don't think is a hard ask. I think this is something that they can totally do, which is just have more NPCs in the world. And for those non-gamers, an NPC is a non-playable character. So these are just, non NPCs that wander throughout the world and the environment. KOTOR 1 and 2 both, that is something they lack severely. These worlds feel super empty. And at the time, it wasn't commonplace to see a lot of NPCs in the world, but that was 2003. This is 2021. We're accustomed to seeing a lot of NPCs wandering around the world and, kind of sort of living out their own life, interacting with one another, taking a walk down the street. All of these things go to make the overall gameplay experience more immersive and more real. It makes the worlds feel alive and vibrant. It's always cool to pass by a group of NPCs and they're having a conversation about something. I mean, they could be talking about, maybe an event that just recently happened on the planet or a big galactic event. They could be talking about the rumor of Revan being killed and all that stuff. So like all of it just makes it fun. I forget, there's some games actually, when you complete certain quests that are notable, NPCs begin to include some of those events in their dialogue. So you'll hear about something that you've done in a recent quest line. They'll talk about it in a side conversation that they're just having amongst themselves. So as you're walking by them, all of a sudden they'll start talking about a quest that you just completed, and it's really cool. It's like a minor thing, but those details really help to make the gameplay more immersive and more rewarding for the players. And it builds your legend and your legacy. And they don't always have to recognize who you are. Sometimes they do. I know ESO does. Like Elder Scrolls Online, when you complete a quest, the NPCs will actually recognize you and acknowledge you for doing that thing, which is really cool. I appreciate all that type of stuff. And I think most players do, especially within an RPG and a single player experience. It makes it feel like you're a part of the world. So yeah, I mean, that's my fifth big thing. And it's something I feel like that's something that they could really execute, which is the NPCs. So on my list, I got three things pretty much that I think, well, four really. The upgraded combat system they have to implement, because if they go into this game and they do not upgrade the combat system, you're not going to attract a lot of new players. I think a lot of the OG fans like myself will play it because we enjoyed the game so much and we want to see the game with modern graphics and new lighting effects and just re-experience the story in 4K. Basically, we're all here for that. But for everyone else, new players who've never played this game, you've got to make it feel more modern. You don't have to change too many story elements unless you're going to make a canonical version of KOTOR, which that completely changes everything. Fully voiced dialogue is an absolute must. You have to have a fully voiced experience in a single player game. Even with dialogue options, like having the actors come in and read the lines that you're going to choose as a player, it helps because it makes it, once again, more immersive. When I hear the character that I am controlling say to the NPC what I've just selected, and then that NPC in turn responds to that statement, it makes it feel more realistic. And it's just something that we've come to expect with modern gameplay. The planetary and auxiliary quest lines is something that they can absolutely, well, I don't know if it's an absolute, but it's definitely something that they should strongly consider, because the game itself, there's not, at the time there were a lot of quests, but if you play games like The Witcher or Elder Scrolls and some of the other modern RPG games, they have so many quests that most people don't even complete every single quest in the game. But the expectation is for most RPG games, you're going to have more quests to do than you have time. And I know that sounds like a lot of extra work, but it's what we expect. Like, single player games, they come with the expectation that I'm going to be playing this game for a couple years. Like, it's something that I'll pick up every now and then. You know, after I beat it the first time, I'll come back and go through certain quest lines, or I might replay the game and choose different dialogue options and see where that leads my character. That's part of the fun of an RPG game. You get to completely, well, not completely, but you've got more freedom and flexibility for how the story progression goes as a player than a game like Call of Duty or any other first person shooter, where the story is very linear and is very set. Like, you don't have the option to pick certain dialogue options or certain actions that will change the entire course of the game. That is the fundamental aspect of an RPG that makes it way different than any other game that you're going to play, because as a player, you've got full control of your, well, not full control, but you've got a lot of control over the gameplay experience. And that's something that we've grown accustomed to, and that's something that we want to see more of. And I think that is something that they should absolutely consider. The exploration reward system, that's an absolute must have. There's no exploration reward system in the current Knights of the Old Republic game, and I think lore wise there are options for the developers and for Lucasfilm to implement certain things within the lore of the time period into the game for players to find and to learn more about certain events that transpired. And if you happen to find, let's say if there's 15 on the planet and you find all 15, then of course you'll be rewarded with some sort of cosmetic upgrade, which for players who like to explore, that's that's what they want. Like, that's one, most of the reward comes from learning about whatever that lore item is, and then two is the acknowledgement of your time and dedication spent to finding these items. So again, all of that goes into the player experience and it being more immersive, because that's what you want from an RPG game. You want to be fully immersed into this world. And then number 5, more NPCs. You just got to have NPCs, man. You got to make these worlds feel alive. Like, you got to make them feel like it's a living environment, that people have day-to-day lives. Like, they do things. You got the shop owners, you got the patrons, you got of course the NPCs that you're going to fight, and then you've got your allied NPCs and things of that nature. Things that they definitely don't need to touch are like the interactions and conversations that you have with your companions on the Ebon Hawk. All that stuff is wonderful. They don't need to touch any of that. Like, that was a cool aspect of that game. There are certain moments after you got past certain quest lines would trigger certain NPC conversations or companion conversations, and when you would go back to the Ebon Hawk, you could actually talk to one of your companions and they would tell you a story about their past, and through that interaction you would learn more about them. And it was a cool thing, because you don't really, at the time it was rare that you played a game where if you had other players and other companions in your group, in your party, you didn't really interact with them. Like, you didn't learn much about them. You'd have to learn about their backstories through like a wiki page that would pop up on the internet. But KOTOR, like, you can actually learn about these characters through the conversations that you had with them, and that was a really cool aspect. And that's definitely not something that they need to change. So yeah, that's my top 5 for sure. Now, touchy subject. By the way, hey Carol, how you doing? Thank you for joining. Uh, Kind of a touchy subject. So here's I guess, the elephant in the room about this. Currently, the Old Republic and the events of this game are not canon. Revan is definitely canon, and he is the main character of the game. So the question is Lucasfilm and Disney going to change any aspect of the original story to make Knights of the Old Republic canon? I, for one, am not opposed to that. I think that's a great thing. I would absolutely love to see that happen. I think that it would be a mistake if they didn't in some way find a way to make this game canon. So that is where I stand on that. And if they do make it canon, I hope they do what they follow the same basically path that was laid out by Jedi Fallen Order, because I believe that campaign was one of the strongest Star Wars video campaigns that we've gotten in a long time, definitely since KOTOR 1 and 2. And personally, I would like to see all of these characters from KOTOR be brought back into canon, because they are some of my favorite characters in Star Wars, and probably some of my favorite characters in fiction, just period. So one thing about the original KOTOR story that I think they should absolutely change is the Reverend somehow, if they could change the Reverend redemption arc. And the reason why I say that is because George Lucas basically, I believe he said that it was his intention that Anakin be the only Jedi fall to the dark side and be redeemed back to the light. Like, that's the true, like, legend of his character. All before, you would have Jedi fall to the dark side, and they would never return to the light. Like, and that's why Yoda and Obi-Wan and the others felt so strongly that once you start down the dark path, forever it will consume your destiny. That's a direct quote from the movies. So if that's the case, it doesn't make sense for there to be an example, especially on the scale of Revan and the things that he did and what he accomplished in his lifetime. If that example exists, that should always be there at the front of their mind. Like, it kind of makes it weird that they would say, like, never, because you have this big example of this character named Revan, which also, I hope we get Revan's actual name, because that's not his name, that's just the title. So if we do make it canon, I hope we get an actual canonical name for the Revanches, because we've never got that. That would be cool. That's a minor ask. Within, if we are going to make a canonical story out of this video game. So that for me is a big thing. We've got to get we got to figure out a way, or they got to figure out a way to make that make sense to me, because let's say they change the story of KOTOR completely, and instead of it happening in the same time period it does, maybe it happens during the Mandalorian Wars. Maybe we're following the actions of Revan, maybe in the back half of the Mandalorian Wars, and then we get the big fall, because that would be interesting. Like, if the game ended at the Battle of Malachor, that would be interesting to me. And then we leave it at that. Or if there is a Reverend redemption, then they'd have to do it in a way, like, if they follow the same path that they did in the original game, they'd have to do it in a way where it was like the best kept secret. Like, no one knew that this character no one knew that Revan was deemed. Like, no one knows um, who the real identity of this character is that you're playing, like, except for his companions. So I don't know. Maybe there's an argument that can be made that over the course of 1,000+ years, it was just forgotten that this, but it's really hard to, given the scope and scale of the events of this game, that the Jedi Order would completely forget about who he was and what he did and how he was able to redeem himself. Because in the story, it is the Jedi Order who actually order Revan to be captured when he comes back as a Sith, and then they wipe his mind. And so you've got record of this now with the Jedi Order and the High Council, because they are the one who gave the order to do it. So why would they forget that all of this happened and he was able to not only redeem himself but save the galaxy? So got some canonical issues, and then they forget about it once the prequels happen and Anakin is doing his thing. Like, it doesn't make sense to me, because the scope and scale of that doesn't it's hard. It's always been hard for me to understand why they just totally forgot about that when they're referencing Anakin. So if it was George's intention to not have for Anakin to be the only Jedi to be redeemed, then of course, if you make this game canon, you would have to change that aspect of Revan's story. Or you could leave it be and just let this game be a Legends story and let the things play out the way they are. But I just don't feel like Disney and Lucasfilm are moving in that direction. They made Revan's character canon in the visual dictionary for the Rise of Skywalker, because one of the starships is actually named after Revan, and those books are canon. Those visual guides are actual canonical material. So we know the character of Revan is a real character within canon. Now, how they choose to tell his story and if they're going to revise his story, I don't see why they wouldn't do it in this game. Like, why would you reboot KOTOR with Revan being the main character, knowing that he's canon, but keep the legend story intact? That makes no sense. And then you're going to have to go back and create a brand new canon story like down the road. Like, no, that makes no sense. So that, I mean, that's really the elephant in the room here. And I think that is going to upset more people depending on how they execute it than anything in my top 5 changes. Like, I know there's a lot of people talking about like the combat system being updated and how that would upset them. Well, if the combat system changes, the potential combat systems are going to upset you, man. And I've got some news for you, because I don't think that this story is going to be the same exact story that we played back in 2003. I just don't see that. It doesn't make sense, being that we've completely had to revamp and revise the canonical timeline. So I think they have to brace themselves for that. But for me, I've always liked KOTOR 2 as a story better than the first one, because the reality of Knights of the Old Republic 1 is that it is really kind of sort of a retelling of Anakin's story and Vader's story. It's the parallels between Revan and Anakin are like so obvious, like it's hard not to draw those comparisons. And I think that was the intention of the story. It's like, oh, we can take this. Imagine if the Anakin story and Anakin Darth Vader story happened, but thousands of years in the past. Like, what would that look like? What if that story happened and it was during the height of the Old Republic and the Sith Empire? Like, how does that change the entire story? And it does. I mean, there's enough differences between the events and the stories that justify those stories being different. But it's clear that the main characters Revan is inspired by Anakin and Darth Vader. However, in KOTOR 2, that is probably the most unique story and one of my favorite stories in Star Wars, and definitely in the Old Republic, because you get the exploration of more of that gray area in the Force and dark and light, and you get a character in Kriya, which is, in my opinion, one of the best written characters in all of Star Wars, who has, been both a Jedi Master and a Sith Lord. And because of that, and because of her experience, she has a way different view of the Force than those two sides. Like, she doesn't see the Force as light or dark. It is just a thing for people to manipulate or to I guess be controlled by, if you will, because the Force has a will of its own. So like, most beings in the galaxy will go through, and the will of the Force is what it is. But then you have an entity like the Sith, who will they try to manipulate the Force and bend the Force's will to their desires, which is why so many people view them as an abomination, because you're trying to alter nature, if you will, to serve you and not the other way around. But KOTOR 2, you get a lot of exploration into the philosophy of the Sith and the philosophy of the Jedi, and the perspectives of right and wrong in action and in action. And your choices in KOTOR 2 matter more so than in KOTOR 1 from a dark and light perspective. Like, it focuses more on the Force and your alignment, and how your decisions not only affect you, but they also affect your characters and your companions, and everyone is affected by the decisions, and everyone in the galaxy is affected by the decisions that you make, whether they be light or dark. And so there's a lot more gravity, to in your decisions that you make within the game. And I felt like that was always like a cool aspect of it, because the game doesn't force you to play, as a Jedi or a Sith. Like, you really can be somewhere in the middle and just understand, like, what's the best course of action for the situation. Don't think of it as, what would a Jedi do or what would a Sith do. Like, if I'm trying to be a Jedi character, then of course you want to do that. But this game kind of sort of is like, well, you don't have to think about it in that way. You can just make the decision that you feel is best. And that's a deviation from the first game. And it's really different for what most of the Star Wars games and material have kind of sort of expressed in the past. Like, it's always been so polarizing between the dark and the light side of the Force. This game was kind of sort of like, your decisions are your decisions, but understand that they affect the galaxy and everyone around you, and they have, your actions have consequences. And that was kind of sort of like the biggest emphasis in the game. And I thought it was a cool choice, because it made you as the player feel like your decisions mattered more. And I think I remember playing Knights of the Old Republic 1, and you kind of approach it like, okay, I want to be a Jedi. Let's make all the light side decisions in the dialogue. Oh, okay, now let's do this playthrough as a Sith. And so you choose all the dark side options in the conversation chain. This, KOTOR 2 was more or less like, you make the decision that you feel best reflect you as a character. Or you can play just like you did KOTOR 1 and be polarized. It didn't really matter, but just I guess they emphasize more so the player had an actual voice in deciding what they wanted to do with the character, and I thought that was a really cool aspect of it. Also, the characters were amazing, and Nihilus is my favorite Sith Lord of all time. Just is. I feel like they need to have a character like that in the sequels. Well, the sequels to the sequels. So basically the next trilogy, if they don't have like, Nihilus was such an imminent threat to the galaxy, like not even to the Jedi and to the Sith, like I mean as to the galaxy as a whole, because of the force powers he exhibited. Like, here's a dude that they called an affliction in the force. Like he had to consume the life essence of other beings in order to stay alive. So he became so good at it that he could consume the life essence of an entire planet. And you know, it harkens back to the line that Vader had on the Death Star, where he's like something about the technology, or do not be too proud of this technological terror. The ability to destroy a planet is like insignificant next to the power of the Force. That was the quote. They manifested that quote in Nihilus. Like, he represented how powerful the Force could actually be and how destructive it could be. You know, like, you think about the Empire invested like all these billions of credits to build the Death Star, and here you have this example of one being from the Old Republic that did exactly what the Death Star could do just through the Force. Like, that's incredible. Very much a threat, and like that was awesome. And I think it's time we see that type of threat in Star Wars, because you could treat Nihilus like Thanos almost. Like he's that level of a threat to the Star Wars galaxy. And then you've got the Sith Emperor from the Old Republic, Vitiate, who, you know, he tried to consume the entire Force essence of the galaxy. Like, you know, he's like the Galactus of the Star Wars universe. Like, so all of these characters came out of the Old Republic. You got some really unique stories. You got some really unique Jedi, some really unique Sith. You got some characters that kind of sort of walk the fine line between Sith and Jedi, between dark and light. You've got dynamic characters within the Republic, both on the military side, also politically. You've also got some characters that are on the Imperial side that are both dynamic and interesting, and you can kind of sort of understand where everyone's sort of thought process is and what motivates them as characters. And I think that time period as a whole is so rich because you've got characters that kind of sort of reflect every aspect of people in society, more so than in the original trilogy and the prequels, because those stories are so linearly focused on the Skywalker legacy that you kind of don't have time to incorporate all these other characters, where in the Old Republic it's not really a centralized lineage or legacy that you're following. You're just looking at the events of the galaxy as a whole, and you're picking a side, and it's really cool. So like, that's why it's my favorite time period in Star Wars, because it's so dynamic and so diverse, and so many different stories have been told in that time period that kind of sort of reflect different aspects of society, and you know, just different philosophies as a whole. And it's a rich, really rich storyline from a storytelling perspective, and I can't wait to dive into this a lot more. Hopefully they dive into the Old Republic content soon, and I think that's what this is kind of sort of indicating. The fact that they're coming back to KOTOR and they're rebooting this franchise lets me know that we've got some Old Republic content coming probably sooner rather than later, at least within, I'd say, 5 years. It has to be. We talked about the Old Republic last week. I mean, not the Old Republic, but the High Republic. The biggest problem with the High Republic for me is that they don't have a villain that is a real threat to the Jedi Order of this time period. The Old Republic doesn't have that problem because the Sith Empire is a real thing. The Republic is a a real entity. You've got the criminal cartels that are at the height of their power as well. The Hutt Syndicate, like this is a time period where the Hutt Syndicate really, solidifies its power within the criminal underworld. So you see all of this. The Mandalorians are like you think the stories of the Mandalorian, and like if you like the Mandalorian TV show, and if you like Boba Fett, man, you'd love the Old Republic because of the stories that they tell. I mean, this is the time period when like the Mandalorians, were riding the mythosaur dragons into battle. Like they had their like these almost like machine like chariots that they would orbit above a planet and then descend upon the population on these like almost like I forgot what the basilisk is what they're called. And they kind of like they descended like a horse. So it's like imagine a Viking invasion from the sea but from space. Like so you got all of these personal ships falling into the planet's atmosphere, and you got these Mandalorians on the back of them, and they're raining fire down on you, and if you hit one of the basilisks, they just hop off and jetpack down. And it's like mind-blowingly, like the scope and scale of the battles during the Old Republic are like some of the best battles that we've gotten in Star Wars as a whole. So that's why I say there's something for everybody. Every type of character that you've ever clung to as a Star Wars fan, or even as an avid Star Wars fan, they've got stories for those types of characters by like the boatload in this time period. So I hope we can dive into this, like, because there's so much that a lot of people never really got to experience unless you were playing the video games or if you were reading the comic books and the the graphic novels and the novels during this time period that were coming out in like the early 2000s. If you weren't up on it and then you don't know anything about these stories, and like these are some of the best stories in Star Wars that have ever been told. And if it wasn't for the Old Republic, a lot of people in the 90s, or at least born in the 90s like myself, you'd have like a lot less Star Wars fans, because the prequels were, a lot of people, I like the prequels, a lot of people, and it was kind of mixed reception to the prequels when they initially came out. The Clone Wars helped people come around to the prequels eventually, but if it wasn't for stuff like Heir to the Empire and the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars the Old Republic, a lot of the, I would wager that a lot of the fandom wouldn't be as strong as it is today if it wasn't for these stories that were being told during this time period. Because for a lot of people who weren't up on the prequel movies, they still had their Heir to the Empire, and they still had the Knights of the Old Republic and the other stories that were happening around the galaxy in different time periods that were resonated with them more. And so hopefully we can get just more of this stuff. But that's all I got. I hit right at the hour mark too. That was awesome. So yeah, just to recap my top 5 Knights of the Republic reboot requests. Actually, let me reorder these. Fully boys. Okay. Yeah, so the upgraded combat system, modernize that combat system. You have to modernize it if you want new players to really enjoy the game. The combat system as it is just outdated. It needs to be revamped. 2, fully voiced dialogue. do not reboot this game and not hire voice actors to read the lines for the main character. This is a game where your choices matter. You have the opportunity to select dialogue options. You have, like, in most conversations, 3 options to choose from. All of those need to be read in a male or female voice, or multiple male and female voices, and depending on, you know, what Lucasfilm and Disney will allow. If they allow full customization of the main character, I want to be able to choose, you know, have options for the voice that I hear for my player. If it's not as customizable as that, then of course you can, you know, you pick the voice actor. Hopefully you find a voice actor that most people will like. They've done a really good job. They did well with Cal Kestis. I think most fans who've played that game have really enjoyed him as Cal Kestis. So yeah, but that, you just have to have that fully voiced dialogue, because that just makes the experience that much more immersive and enjoyable. Like, it's one thing to click on a dialogue option and then the NPC responds to what you just clicked on, versus clicking on the dialogue, hearing your character say exactly what was written in the tone and context of what it was written. And on the note of context, please make sure that whatever is written is actually what the voice actor is going to read, because there are times when I've been playing RPG games where you select a line of dialogue and the voice actor doesn't actually say what's written, and what they say changes the context of what I was saying. And I'm like, yo, I picked that option because of what was said, and what the voice actor just said completely changes the context. And had I known that's what they were going to say, I want to pick that option. That's a pet peeve of mine. But, you know, either way, just voice it, okay? Number 3, exploration reward system. You got to make it rewarding for players to go and explore the world. Open up the world a bit. Make the maps a little bit larger. Well, they don't really. I don't know. Actually, the maps aren't that bad. Like, they're pretty large, actually. But make it a little bit more open. Make it a little bit more inviting to explore. Let me be able to find things out in the world for me to learn about the lore of the time period. And then when I do, you know, dedicate time to finding these lore items out in the world, I need to be rewarded with some sort of thing, something cosmetic, whether it be, you know, a new outfit customization, ship paint job customization, lightsaber customization, whatever. Doesn't matter. Just reward the players for their time exploring the world. More in-world NPC characters is my number 4 on the wish list, because NPCs make the world feel more lived in. It adds a level of vibrance to the world and realism that makes it all more immersive. Everything that you do within, you know, this reboot and this update has to make the gameplay experience more immersive for the players, and the NPCs is one, because the noticeable and the biggest complaint and gripe about KOTOR from everyone who's ever played the game is how empty the worlds are. Like Terrace, for instance, this is a planet that has, like, this is supposed to be like Coruscant, which, so, you know, billions of people on the world. And in the game, you might run into 10 NPCs. Like, it's ridiculous. It's like you're living in this big city. You see, like, you know, you look around the world and you see, like, all of these speeders, you know, buzzing by. And then you look on the street and it's like no one. And you're like, okay, so I'm just wandering around, like, wondering where everyone went. Like, am I missing something? So yeah, like, adding those NPCs is an absolute must. You got to do that, because no one likes walking around an empty world. I'm sorry, it's boring. Fallen Order has the same thing. Like, the only characters that you're going to run into are the Imperial soldiers that you got to kill. So everybody in the world that you're going to experience, that you're going to interact with, are Imperials that you have to kill. So yeah, give us some NPCs that aren't, um, combative. Give us, shop owners and people out on the street having conversation, doing people things. Give us that. And then the last but not least, but probably the more difficult of the 5 options that I've listed, are extra quests. Having a planetary quest line that, you know, is basically, you have a unique quest line that is for that specific planet that you're on, that is optional, but if you do it, you get more XP, and more XP means you can upgrade your character faster, get better skills and skill sets. You can all upgrade those quicker, make it easier to fight. So if you're struggling to get through certain, bosses, you can go back and do some, quests to boost your experience level to upgrade certain skills. So that's something that I would absolutely love to see, because as the game stands, you only have that main quest line, and then there's a few side missions, but not many. In modern RPG games, we kind of sort of expect there to be a diversity in a almost impossible number of not NPCs, but quest lines to complete. Not outside of the your main quest line, like that's fine, but I want to be able to explore the world and experience things, and not just jump in this game to complete quests, like, well, in that linear fashion, of course, but that is the point of the game. But like the fun of it is to be able to kind of sort of customize my own experience and to have my own experience within the game. And more quests increases, the uniqueness of your experience as a player. So yeah, those are my 5. That's my wish list. I've got nothing more on it. I'm actually gonna probably cut this and then have my top 5 listed, and then I'm gonna post that to the channel. But thank you all for tuning in tonight. Had a wonderful conversation. Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in next Saturday. Ooh, I don't think we're doing anything on Friday, or maybe, I don't know. But Falcon and the Winter Soldier is over, so I don't think we have anything on Friday. But Saturday, we will be continuing our ranking of Marvel movies, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on this channel. We'll be moving into Sony and anything else that we did not, list. We've already ranked the MCU movies. We've ranked the Fox movies. That is actually on the channel now. You can go watch that. And so yeah, the only thing left is Sony, and then we'll be moving into DC the week after that. So yeah, here we go. That's it. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next week, and then I'll be back here next Sunday, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for another Starlight Beacon episode. As I always say, peace, love,